Get into chapter 4. If you remember in chapter 3 that Nehemiah scheduled and worked with the workers, and he wanted you to know who they were. He wanted you to know where they came from. He also wanted you to know what they did on the wall. And so that's what chapter 3 was. It was to be able to see that the wall was coming together. And when we begin chapter 4, we're going to see that construction was well progressing. We're also going to see that Mr. Sanballat, did I do okay on that one? I know, Sanballat. Mr. Sanballat was now just not angry, he was furious. Now in the South, we used to say he had a hissy fit. He was having a major hissy fit. He was so indignant and he blew his stack. So I'm going to begin us reading chapter 4, verses 1 through 2, and we're going to see a lot in this. But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth, upset, hissy fit, angry, furious, and took great indignation, and he mocked the Jews. If you want to underline that, he mocked the Jews. Verse 2, and he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, who do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? So here he was trying, Sanballat, to show force. He was scared to come up there by himself, so he brought an army. He brought the Samaritan army with him so that he could be the big wig. That's another Southern term. So that he could show his strength. And Sanballat was hopping mad. And he was using mockery as his weapon. And we also can kind of, when you see what he's saying, you can see him pacing back and forth in front of the Samaritan army, speaking loudly. But then if we look in verse 3, we see that his sidekick's there, and his sidekick's name was Tobiah. Tobiah the Ammonite, verse 3, was with him. And he said, even that which they built, if a fox goes up, he shall even break down their stone wall. How sweet. I mean, here they were working. And what are they doing? Sarcasm. What are they doing? Mentally trying to cause them to throw up their hands and say, it's not going to work. And if a fox goes up this wall, it's going to crush. And you can almost hear when you think that the Samaritan army is there, that they're all laughing in agreement with what was being said. Ha, ha, ha. Listen how great these men are and how poor these guys are that are working on the wall. But what these men did not realize and what they did not understand is they were not mocking man. They were mocking God. And that's what we see here in verse 3. We see if a fox goes up, you're going to destroy the wall. And the point that Tobiah missed is that ultimately is going to destroy him was that it wasn't their stone wall, it was God's stone wall. It wasn't any way that it was a group of people that built it, it was God's wall. God giving instruction, God giving grace. And then the people that were building the wall were given the energy by the power of God. And so when we look at this and we hear the scoffing, we need to realize that when people make fun of you, it's because, first of all, as Jesus said, forgive them, they know not what they do. But even more than that, they're trying to discourage you. And we're going to see some things in the next several verses. But I want you to know, don't let anyone discourage what God has called you to do. It's time. You were born for such a time as this. But I'm going to show you how Nehemiah handled this. Let's look in verses 4 through 5. So here Nehemiah says, Hear, O our God, for we are despised. They were. And turn their reproach upon their own head. And give them for a prey in the land of captivity. And cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee. He was to let them hold their own God. For they have provoked thee to anger before the builders. So what does he do when he has pushback? He prays. And I'm telling you, when you have pushback from the enemy, you need to pray. He's telling them, God, don't let them get away with this. But he was not angry himself because of personal things that are coming against him. He was angry because God was being mocked. It reminds me so much of David when he said, the uncircumcised Philistine. I mean, that was a slap. As Mike said, it was hitting below the belt. But what the purpose was is that you're not going to make fun of my God. And because of that, what you're seeing is righteous indignation. And what I'm telling you is even though you're mocking the God of Israel, then you're going to see how God's going to raise it up. And I also believe as you read this that with those two men, I think they actually thought that Jehovah didn't raise it up, so it must not have supposed to be raised. And those are things that you and I look at and we go, how stupid. But that's exactly in some ways they probably thought, God, you didn't raise it up, so I guess you don't want these men to raise it up. So let's go ahead and look at verse 6. I want you to get the first couple of words in verse 6. So they built we the wall. Even though they were criticized, even though they were mocked, even though that they were possibly even discouraged by what was said, notice they continued to build the wall. And I'm telling you, when you have the devil come against you, when you have people come against you, let me go a step further. When you have family that comes against you, just keep on building what God has told you to build. Don't let anything keep you from that. Keep on working. And the best response Nehemiah could have given to that man, those two men and the army, was they kept on building. They kept on glorifying God. And Nehemiah, as we see here, let's look at the rest of verse 6. And all the wall was joined together into the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. I mean, that just says it all. They didn't stop. The people had a mind to work. Another way of putting it is their mind had been renewed. They didn't want to see a broken down wall any longer. They wanted things to be fixed. So, I had told you that I would give you some dimensions. Still haven't been able to find the age of Nehemiah. Thank you, Jesse. But the length of the wall, does anyone want to take a guess of how big the wall was? You can't be wrong because I had to look it up. How was the length of the wall that he rebuilt? Any guess?
Like in circumference?
Well, it was the length, 5 miles. Anybody else? Boy, y'all are quiet. Just take a guess. No, 6 miles. How about 2.497? It was almost 3 miles, 2.5 miles. And so the height of the wall was 39 feet. That's a pretty tall wall. Then the thickness was 8.2 feet. So I went ahead and I looked, and it says it contained 34 watchtowers. Remember, we looked at it in chapter 3 where they actually gave the name of the people that built the watchtowers. There were 34 of them. Then it goes on and said there were 7 main gates, and there were 2 minor gates. So I love to have things broken down. I was like 2.5 miles. Because you guys walk that, and y'all look at your watch and go, oh my goodness, I've done 2.5 miles. But you really don't know how far that is. So I looked it up. 2.5 miles is from the steps of the Capitol building in Washington through to the Lincoln Memorial. Now, if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., I will tell you, I feel like I had walked a million miles. But to go from the Capitol to Lincoln Memorial was 2.5 miles. Gives you perspective. If you've ever been to Hollywood, I've only seen the sign. I didn't walk the street. But that Hollywood street where they had all the stars on it, that's 2.4 miles. Then, if you're talking about the Indianapolis and Daytona Motor Speedway, my mother loved that. That was 2.4 miles as well, all the way around. So there gives you the perspective of how much they built. Without machinery, without power tools, without cranes or anything that they had, it's because of the strength of the power of God. However, when we look at verses 7 and 8, we're going to see that the opposition from Sanballat was not finished. If ridicule and mockery had no effect on them, they decided they were going to try the threat of physical violence. They stepped into a new area. And I'm telling you, sometimes when persons use mockery or they kind of, try to hurt you with the words they say, if they don't see you're going to react, they're going to try to do a new step. They want you to quit. And here we're seeing in verses 7 through 8. And it happened when Sanballat and Tobiah, the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being destroyed and the gaps were beginning to close, that they became very angry. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. And what they were trying to do was hinder what was going on, because we can see that the walls were only half built at that time. And you know who it frightened and wasn't the builders? It was Sanballat and Tobiah. They became scared. They're going to accomplish what we don't want them to accomplish. And I even covered it last time that we had our session. They didn't want Nehemiah to be lifted up so that the people would look to him as their source. Because these men had been in control. They had manipulated. They had, as we're going to see in the next several verses, stolen from the people. And so they were scared that they were going to realize, the people, that they had done them wrong. And so the builders were actually making progress, and these guys, Sanballat and Tobiah, did not like that. So what does he do? We see this in verse 9. This is Nehemiah. Nevertheless, we made our prayers unto our God. Again, he cried, God, I have to have answers. What do I do? And set a watch around them day and night because of them. Now that's verse 9. And what we see is that Nehemiah received wisdom from God. If you don't know what to do, then ask God. He knows everything. And then the thing is that, and I've had to learn, shut up so you can hear him. Okay? Because when you talk, he's not. He wants you to listen to him. So what does he do? Nehemiah loads the wall with as many people as he can to stand guard. That's how he does the recruitment. And it really was a good tactic because it was reverse intimidation. All of a sudden, these two men and even the Samaritan army saw, ooh, they're going to fight back. And again, as I was sharing with Mike, and I said, I remember having bullies in school, because we told our kids, if you have a bully, stand up to him and they'll run. And I don't know if it's that way now or not, but whenever you stood up to a bully, they ran. And here they did the same thing. Because of Nehemiah putting them on the wall that they could be seen, all of a sudden it worked. And they backed up. It was like, I can't press these people. They're serious. They are going to hurt me. And so Nehemiah mobilized the men, the women, say women, and children. He wanted them on the wall so he could show the force that he had. And they weren't scared. These men, women, and children were not in any way scared. And they also had weapons on them. They also waited around the clock for any surprise attack. And when Sanballat and Tobiah saw these people, they realized they had lost the element of surprise. And they backed up and they quit. Now that just means for a little bit. Devil always loved to come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But I'm telling you, they would not quit. So let's look at verse 10. So here we are, verse 10, I want you to catch something. And it says, and Judah said, I want you to underline that. Because otherwise you're going to forget it. And Judah said, well, I thought the guys' names were Sanballat. I thought it was Tobiah. I thought it was another name. Well, who's Judah? Those are the very people that were working on the wall. All of a sudden, the people that are working on the wall become discouraged. And that's why we see, and Judah said. So what is getting ready to be said is to unfortunately cause the camp itself to say, well, Tori said, Wes said, Michelle said, And so the camp is coming almost unfunctional because the people in the camp don't know what to do. And so when Judah said, let's look at verse 10. The strength of the bearers of the burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. They're saying, man, there's a lot of junk here. I can't be able to do what I'm supposed to do because I'm dealing with rubbish. I'm dealing with not being able to take care and build the walls. Verse 11. And our adversaries said, they shall know. No, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them and slay them and cause the work to cease. He's saying they're going to try to make us fight, but we can't fight. We're nothing more than slaves. There's that mentality. I am nothing more than a dear grasshopper. But I want you to look at verse 12. And it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us, say 10 times. 10 times. Say 10 times. 10 times. Well, I like that because Gracie only wants to get an answer after she's asked me 10 times. Because she wants her answer and not my answer. And see, and that's what we're seeing here. They're coming to Nehemiah and saying, they're going to kill us. They're going to destroy us. They want to have a fight. I can't do it. And so 10 times, say 10 times. From all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon you. So another way of putting it is 10 times they came and said, we can't do this. And so they are telling Nehemiah, they're going to say this 10 times and nothing's going to change. There's still going to be an oppressiveness that's going to be here. And all of a sudden, and I don't understand the new youth language. Michelle, I was telling her she's got to fix our little cabinet in the back. And she said, I've got to juju it. What do you call it? Juge it. Oh, how many of y'all know what that means? Juge? Is this French, African, or something like that? Okay, so there's a phrase that I didn't know, but I was thinking another way of putting it is the jibes. That's a word that I had when I was growing up. The enemy was trying to tell them, put your tools down, put your swords down, because I want you to listen to me. I'm working with you, and I'm not going to work with you too much longer because they're going to kill me. So let's put down our swords. Let's put down our tools, because that's what you're seeing in verse 12. Okay, so I want you to understand Judah's words. And if you want to write this down, I'll try to go slow. We see that these workers had 3 things occur. Number 1, their confidence had been deflated. And again, if you're ever in a place to where God has called you to do something, and all of hell has come against you, your confidence will be deflated. You'll think, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. The second thing is their strength was depleted. They were having to move boulders. They were having to move things around without equipment. They didn't have a bulldozer. They didn't have all the things that you and I have in today's world, so their strength had become depleted. And this one is number 3, the most important. Their vision had disappeared. My people perish for a lack of vision. They forgot what the wall was going to look like. They didn't understand the purpose of it. Yeah, they were just about done, but they thought that they couldn't complete the thing. Their motivation, it was gone. I mean, that's those different words that we all use. So, let's look at verse 12. And it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt of them came, they said unto them, how many times? 10 times. From all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon us. So let's look at verse, 13. So what does Nehemiah do? He's a great man of God. He encouraged himself first, and then we see he encouraged the people of God. So how do you encourage the people of God? I mean, they were tired. They had lost their visions. Their strength was depleted. Their vision was gone. How did he encourage them? He decided to give them a common goal. And we see this in verse 13. Because when he looked at the wall, he realized that the Echterlings were over here and the Haneys were over here. He realized that the Tory Johnson was over here and there was another Johnson over here. He saw that they were separated as families. And when he saw that, he knew that families work together better than separated. That's in the body of Christ as well. And so he is saying that we are not going to break them up anymore. We're going to put the family together. So I'm going to have the families work together so the mother and father can encourage the children. And I kind of get tickled because I know how I encourage Jesse and Michelle. Let's go get it done. But you say it and you're going to get in trouble. But when a mom and dad can say, come on, you can do this, it encourages. It causes them to stand up taller and stronger. And because the work was so scattered, so were the families. And Nehemiah just started bringing it better. He began to reorganize the teams. And he put them in the same families. Because he knew family, at times, worked better together. And so that's what he was trying to do. But then I want you to look at verse 18. This is the part that I get tickled at. And this is more for Miss Lisa. For the builders, everyone had his sword girded by his side. So he not only gave them, the ability to be with your family, he gave them a sword. And he said, and so build. And then this is the part for Lisa. And then he sounded the trumpet, which was by me. So he gave him a trumpet. He gave him an object to be able to, not to come and rescue him, but to sound the alarm. We are working together. Devil, you are defeated. You are not going to in any way take away what has been given to us. And again, if we looked back just to verse 17, we see that they had the trowels in one hand and the sword in the other. They were working and not stopping, but they were ready to go to war. They were ready to fight the battle. They were ready to do the impossible job. And I'm sure they were a sight. Can you imagine a sword and a trowel? They were saying, we're going to build and we're going to fight. We're not going to back down. And then we see, like I said in verse 18, was a rallying point for the army of Judah. The trumpeter was always going to be by the side of Nehemiah. So when the boss said, blow the trumpet, guess what he did? He blew the trumpet. And then what happened was, if the trumpet was blown, they all came together. They left where they were so they could come together to worship God and give each other strength. He got that in prayer. And I'm telling you, blow the trumpet in your life. Begin to worship him. That's blowing our trumpet. God, I thank you that there's more for me than against me. I thank you, God, that this job is easy because you've given me the strength of angels. Father, thank you. And this trumpet was a rallying call for the troops that were there in front of him. So let's look at verses 21 through 23. And I love this part. So we labored in the work. Half of the men held the spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem, that they may be guard by night and a working party by day. To me, it sounds like they didn't sleep. And then it goes on, so neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of God who followed me, and this is the part I want you to get, I get tickled at it, took off their clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. To me, it tells you they didn't take a break. The women were busy building the wall. They were saying, we're not going to take off our clothes unless we need to have them washed. And you have to remember how many days it took for them to build the wall? Does anybody remember the number? What? 52 days. So for the most part, there may have been some real stinky people, but for 52 days, they built that wall. And he gave them the instruction, you're not going to take off your clothes except for the washing of the clothes, not of them. He didn't want them to break down. But there was no stopping Nehemiah, none at all. He was prepared to fight, and he was prepared not to abandon the work on the wall. He was also a true champion, and that's who you are. You and I have to make the determination in our heart that nothing's going to keep us from accomplishing what God has told us to do. Even if it sounds silly, even if it's hard. Even if it means we're picking up rocks, even if it means that we are staying and stinky and we can't wash our clothes, we are not going to stop. And that is a sign of being a true champion. And it also shows a sign of having courage. And I want you to know in today's world, we have to have courage. We can't be fearful. Remember the scripture that I gave, fear not, for there's nothing to fear. That needs to be our theme song. We cannot be fearful. We have to get in there and say, God, whatever it takes. You wouldn't have called me for this time if it wasn't be that you're going to equip me to do the job. Now, we're through chapter 4. You can all stand up. You can go get some coffee, water, before we start chapter 5. Hallelujah.